Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
And this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. Welcome to part 2 of the Personalization Cast. If you missed part 1, go ahead and check it out because we're going to be picking up our conversation on cold email personalization at scale right now.
So, Jack, question for you. How do I go about personalization? What do I do? How much time should I invest in it? Would that cost me a lot of money? Should I use a software? I got all those kind of questions that we need to explore together.
So here's how you do it. Step 1, like we just talked about, starts with building your list. The idea is to build your list on a very specific set of criteria. So you're actually trying to make it difficult for prospects to earn the right to be on your list. They have to be, let's say, an exact match for who you're going after. For example, let's say your best customers happen to be e-commerce managers that just got hired. If that's the case, it would be wise of you to build a list of e-commerce managers that just got hired this month. And once you do that, something magical happens. A, you have a list of people who very likely need what you have to offer. And B, you have something to say to every single one of them that is personal. So my favorite way to start a very personalized campaign is pick a set of criteria and talk about that in your email. It's a very easy way. You don't even need to use a merge tag for this one part of your email because just mentioning, hey, congrats on the new e-commerce role can apply to everyone on your list. Will your list be thousands of prospects long? No, but as we've been mentioning, that's not the name of the game. So it starts by building a very specific list. And then go ahead, once you have the prospects in a CSV, I recommend starting to draft out 1 or 2 like basic emails that you would write to a specific prospect on your list. So before you go thinking about how do I write a template or what kind of merge tags do I need, just pick a couple prospects and write an email to them. And you may find yourself talking about how you admire the company they work for. You may talk about how you notice that they do an exceptional job with Google AdWords. Just as you write out these drafts, merge tags and custom attributes will start to bubble up to the surface. So you may find that, okay, so here's how I'm going to start off the email. I'm going to congratulate them on the new role, and then I'm going to insert a compliment on the company. Find something that you do admire about where they work or the products they sell. And so you can start to see that there's a few opportunities for custom attributes. Let's say you've already covered congratulating them on the new role and complimenting them about their job. Another custom attribute that I think fits well with pretty much any cold email campaign is a PS. So a simple sign-off that talks about something personal that the prospect may have shared online, whether that's in their bio, their Twitter feed, something that you can relate to that shows a human is behind this email and that they are like them. So if you guys are both into craft beer, inserting a custom attribute for PS, hey, where's your favorite brewery in city, would do very well. And so full circle, start off your hunt for these custom attributes by writing out a couple emails by hand, and you'll start to see where you can plug in some attributes for the rest of your list.
What about the difference between personal personalization or actually company personalization or job personalization? So I mean, like the Shanghai stuff is not really company related. It's more like personally related. And you mentioned the personal stuff goes in a PS. In his case, in the cold email I reached, that was the first line, and that's what brought my attention because not a lot of people should know about that.
Awesome question. So a lot of people don't know that this can be overdone to the point where I've gotten responses that say like, whoa, that's creepy. How did you know that? And so here's my sort of take on it. If it's something that they're proud to share online, such as their passion for craft beer or their interest in machine learning, then feel free. They've obviously made a point to share it with the world if it's in a bio. If you have to do lots of digging, you're treading in a little bit dangerous waters because people may be shocked that that kind of information can be found online. So here's what I recommend. You're going to have two groups of prospects. You're going to have the sharers and you're going to have the not sharers, right? So the sharers are people with a strong social presence. They have their own blog. They tweet regularly. They're updating stuff on LinkedIn. Those people should get a little head nod to something they've shared personally because they want the world to know about it, and totally fine to bring up something that they just shared. For the rest of the people, and I've found that it makes up more than half of most lists, especially if you're dealing with smaller companies or less techie companies, maybe like contractors who are not sharing a lot online. Then talk about public company info that you can use to personalize the messages. This is going to be a lot easier to find because every company that you're targeting should have a website. So there's a talking point buried somewhere in their website, no matter how simple it is. And just basically cut your list into two groups or add them on two separate campaigns is typically what I've done. Is you have a sequence that highlights something personal for the sharers, and then a sequence that talks about company info in the non-sharing group.
Do you have some results on those? Which one actually performs better?
Yeah, so it's going to be harder to find the personal information. You're going to have a lot more stats talking about company info unless you're going after influencers or just a group that does this kind of social sharing by trade. So I would say I've found that sharing company stuff is a safer bet, although for the prospects that are proud of what they're promoting online, it does work really well for them. But don't try a middle ground where you're digging up too much facts about somebody who's not very public online. That hasn't worked very well.
Jack, do you have an example of something quite creepy that you've done in your past attempts?
Sadly, yes. And let's talk about it. So the angle here, the approach was I was looking for companies that were using a particular tool that was not easy to find in typical, let's say, technology databases that one might use for this kind of thing. So I figured there might be a way to build a list of LinkedIn people that mention this particular tool in their skills section. And then I took that list and found the companies that they used to work for, which indicated that that company may still be using that tool.
Nice.
And then I put a sequence together that's what I thought. I thought this was clever. But the sequence basically said like, hey, I saw that Amy used to work for you guys and she was, proficient in using this tool. Wondering if you guys still used it or not. And that just fell completely flat on the face. I think there was a little bit of taking a look back at it. I would not create a campaign around past employees. I think that's just a sore spot. Nobody likes firing or when people leave the company. And, if I was doing that again, I made sure to talk about people who only were currently at the company and just maybe reached out to them to see if, they were using the tool and if they were happy with it or that probably would have been a much less creepy approach. So don't do that.
Yeah, so in your case, one of the pivot would be Amy still working at the company and it'd be like, hey, Amy, I noticed that on your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned you're pretty skilled at this tool. Are you currently using it at your company? Because there's a problem that I want to solve or XYZ kind of thing, right?
There was a campaign that comes to mind that did much better. A win that just sort of shows like the many different kinds of company attributes that you can add to your campaigns. I was looking through reviews of B2B technologies on G2 Crowd. I was searching for people that had made a comment that said something like about the speed or about one of the features, so to speak. If there was a negative comment, 3 stars or less, that mentioned a specific problem, I grabbed the sentence of that review and included it in an email. So it's basically like, hey, I was on G2 Crowd and I came across this review, insert one sentence that highlights this feature that we were trying to improve on. And it was basically like, hey, just wanted to get your take on how this problem could sort of be solved. That sort of started off, it got a lot of replies that were like, holy cow, that was a pretty darn good email. In fact, 2 people out of that campaign ended up like saying, hey, if you ever want a sales job, you can come over our company's base here. We do remote stuff. It was like people were impressed. But to make that even better, I wish I would have found a way to make sure the campaign was on a positive spin. Nobody likes getting a spotlight shown on their faults. So That was a little bit tricky because I'm saying like, hey, there's a problem. I think going back, I would have made sure that I went very, very heavy on complimenting them and then sort of sprinkled that in to see if they were interested in doing an even better job.
Let's say that I perceive this as being a ton of work. Is there any tool, software that could help me out where I just enter Jack Reamer, email@sales.com, and it will find me something interesting on you that I can just build on?
I wish. I wish. But look, here's the good and the bad news. Bad news, no. You can pull a ton of stats about a company and about a person, but you're going to need to have a human element to make this stand out. So something that I found is like a lot of people are very, very savvy with web scraping. So if information is available online that you can bring into your campaign, that's good. It's better than not pulling in specific bits of information, data points about the prospect. But that's not enough to make your email stand out. And it's not enough to get the deliverability benefits, a really personalized cold email. So you're going to have to do things that machines cannot do. Otherwise, it's just too easy for the rest of your people trying for the attention of your prospects to just use a scraper and drop in some information. One example would be, it's really, really easy to grab the Glassdoor rating for a company. If you want to use that as a talking point to either identify companies that may need what you have to offer, or just use that as like a stepping point where like you want to congratulate them on having a really strong profile. They're obviously a great place to work. But in order to write an email like you got, Jeremy, that you were mentioning at the beginning of the cast, you've got to get more involved. And if you're lazy, and believe me, this is not a bad mentality to have, but if you're lazy, there's a couple of things you can do. Quickest, easiest one is to pass your CSV sheet of leads to a VA. And here's what you do. You just take columns within that CSV and you basically write out what you're looking for, what you're looking to add into your sequence. And then
a Google Sheet works pretty well for that. So you can share it and you don't need to pass files around.
Exactly. And I'm thinking this should be done by you in the beginning, just so that you can at least do 10. And that'll make sure that the information you're asking your VA to find is really available. And 2, you can share like a bit of a template, like, okay, here's some examples to follow. I've done the first 10 for you. Go ahead and fill out the rest of the sheet. That's a great way to get started. And even if you don't consider yourself a lazy person, I'm guessing if you're listening to this podcast, there are things way more valuable that you should be working on besides this sort of internet research. Even if you just sort of give it a final glance before it's uploaded, I'm guessing that's a pretty good way to go about finding this information. And there's one other option if you want to do like the really easy method. If you don't have a VA that you're working with and you don't feel like bothering with hiring or finding a good fit, I have a small team that basically just does email personalization. So I don't know if I've never done a plug on the show, but I'm going to. I'll throw a link in the show notes, basically just emails@sell.com/contact, and just fire off a message and I'll see if I can point you the right direction there.
So great stuff. So that means basically get a VA, give that person some directions, and for you to be able to do that, just do it yourself manually a few times first. And maybe as you do it manually, just shoot a screen recording so you can show what sort of processes you have in place to gather those personal information, and then give the spreadsheet to your VA so they can fill it, and then you can import that into QuickMail or any other tool you're using for your cold email.
Last tip, make sure you've cleaned your list before handing it off to a VA. There's no sense in paying somebody or doing this yourself, finding these custom attributes for emails that are going to bounce. So just make sure the deliverable, you don't want to bother with risky or especially undeliverable. So just clean it up and you'll spend time only on the good emails.
What are the sort of expectation in terms of how much I should pay for getting that personalization if I get a VA for doing it?
So basically, your VA should be able to do between 20 and 30 rows an hour, depending on the kind of information you're asking them to do. So it's about 1 every 2 minutes or every 2.5 minutes. If they're doing some really heavy digging, like Jeremy, I imagine the person who reached out to you and found your Facebook that said you're in Shanghai and mentioned a couple other things, they may have spent 5 minutes at least getting some of that information. I think the important thing to think about as you consider whether or not to scale out this personalization effort or not is how much better is your positive response rate, and are those extra conversations paying for this service? Chances are spending an extra $100 per batch of leads, if it gets you twice the amount of interest, then it's probably easy to justify that.
Okay, so here's my recommendation, guys. If you're currently using cold email and you don't have much personalization, I'd say start with a PS and then compare, and then start with 100 prospects and start to compare your positive reply rate with the one that don't have a PS. Sounds fair?
That sounds, it's a great recommendation. And you may find yourself kind of getting, excited about this, because I think a lot of people are not taking full advantage of this. So those that are, they're the ones that are going to have the best response rates and probably just the best results flat out for cold email. It's almost like I can compare this to content marketing in a lot of ways, where it's like the person who takes time to make a very, very, very good, thorough, definitive article on something. They're the ones that are going to get 90% of the traffic for the term they're going for. And for the rest of the websites that are just sort of doing the bare minimum for articles, trying to take like, if we publish twice a week, then we'll just have a lot of traffic based on volume of posts as opposed to quality. It sort of backs into this cold email personalization, where it's like the people who are doing an exceptional job with a lower volume of emails maybe are the ones seeing phenomenal reply rates and just very happy with their campaigns.
That's it from me.
Me too. All right, go personalize. So is personalization worth it? Data from 60,000 cold email templates says yes. So make sure you include more custom attributes in your cold emails to improve your reply rates. Remember, emails with multiple custom attributes perform best, so go beyond the traditional 2 attributes of company and first name if you want to stand out in a crowded inbox. Finally, free up your time by outsourcing your personalization effort. Start by adding a few custom attributes yourself and record a video of the process so your VA can take over and help you win your prospect's reply. Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.